Hey everyone, it's Horror Free For All, and I hope you're doing well today. I'm finally ready to bring you my Creepshow Volume 2 ranking video. Now, if you don't know what I'm referring to the comic series that Image Comics is currently putting out for the Creepshow IP. They've done 2 total volumes as of now, and in this volume, there's 2 specials included in there that I'm also going to include in here because on the trade paperback, when you see Volume 2, you only get issues 1 through 5, but it is omitting the holiday special and the adaptation of Joe Hill's Wolverton Station that was in Joe Hill's Full Throttle anthology book. So there's 13 total stories to go over in this volume, which is 3 more than the previous one. And I have to say, off the cuff, the Volume 2, or this run that they did recently, isn't as strong as Volume 1 in my opinion. Now, I will say the 3 strongest stories in here are definitely something to experience, and I would highly recommend them to you. Maybe the rest of my top 5 as well, but the rest of this volume is totally skippable. This is not must read or must experience Creepshow by any means. In my opinion, I think Creepshow shines best in its movie formats. Normally, if we're not talking about Creepshow 3, at least Creepshow 1 and 2 in the discussion. The television series is a close compromise for me. I really love that show, and I love that it's keeping the Creepshow IP alive. But normally, when we see stories brought to screen, there is a lot more breathing room with the story. Now, sometimes that's up to debate, whether we're measuring the merit of the story and how much there is to chew on with it. But for the most part, I think that the live action representation of the franchise is a little bit better than its comic counterparts. The comic books, unfortunately, have this ailment, for the most part, where there's just not enough page space to flesh out a concept or story. And a lot of these concepts would make fantastic episodes or segments in movies, but they put them in the comics. And I honestly feel like some of the concepts made in at least season 3 or season 4 could have been comic book stories, and they needed to trade some of these out. I don't know, maybe they made them because it was budget friendly. I couldn't tell you. But nonetheless, we do have 13 stories to talk about, and we have 7 issues of comics. So let's get right into it. If you don't know my criteria for how I rate things, from the very bottom, we have genuinely awful, bad, meh, okay, decent, good, very good, great, and perfect. And there were 5 categories that got 0 entries for this. We had no perfects, no greats, no okays, no bads, and no genuinely awfuls. Now, this might measure differently, especially with the last 2 stories, because there's 2 stories in this volume that I do see people kind of at odds with each other because they have political undertones with them, or sometimes even just blatant overtones. And I can see why that just turns you off from these 2 that I actually have at the bottom. So with that being said, just know that going forward, I'm not trying to, cause any controversy with why I put them here. That's just part of the reason why they're at the bottom, okay? So with that being said, in my opinion, the worst one from this volume is only a meh story, so take it for what you will. It's Burning Ambition. It was from issue 5, and it was written by Saladin Ahmed, and I gave this a 2.25 out of 5 stars. The concept of this one is about a politician who basically leads I guess what they're trying to go for is an alt-right, mob, essentially, of voters that support him. And he's starting this book-burning campaign across the United States where they're trying to burn comic books that essentially, come to support and, give a platform to minority voices. And at a certain point of the story, let's just say some woman who's scorned by this politician puts a curse on him, and he gets put into a comic book himself, and he's subjected to, let's just say, bodily harm via the panels, and he might get what's coming to him. I guess that's what the story's trying to go with, asshole comeuppance. But that's essentially what you're going to expect out of this one. Now, this story, I can see the angle here, but it's definitely a politicized argument, and I'm not for these kind of stories in anthology horror. I like to have these stories as escapism, and this one felt like it should have been maybe a political cartoon than put into Creepshow. And I can see why people are pissed with this one. But I do like the concept of sending the politician into a panel. I thought that was really cool with how that stuff worked in the story. I never would have thought that, you know, the lines that divide panels in each page can like cut people's skin. That's a really cool concept. I just wish they did something else with the politician. Maybe that he was taking money from kids or something, or anything besides putting a group of people against another group of people. It's a very divisive story, and it's set up to be that way, like it's us versus them, and I don't like stories like that. So yeah, that's why it's here. And at number 12, this is another one that's kind of fueled by a very hot topic in today's political climate. It is Make Your Choice. This story came from issue 1, and it was written by Garth Ennis, of all people. And I really normally like Garth Ennis stuff when he's telling long stories, but seeing him write a short story for a comic, nah, I'm good. I give this a 3 out of 5 stars, and it's a decent story. This one, it's about a man who loves to protest abortion clinics, and one day he starts getting haunted by a vision of a baby fetus. And this fetus follows him around his day-to-day life while he's meeting with his cohorts, planning another protest. He goes to the bathroom, finds a fetus in his underwear. He finds a fetus in his sink. He can't escape it. And you wonder why this is happening to him. But there's a recontextualization at the end when he's talking to his wife about something really fucked up he did to a young girl in years past, and this supposedly is the aha moment of why this is all happening to him. And yeah, you get an ending where asshole gets what's coming to him, but not by the thing that you would expect. It's not the fetus that carries it out. So this one, I think it's decent in the idea of I do think the last minute reveal kind of helps the story, because without it, it just felt a little too heavy-fisted with the topic. And like I said, we're bringing in political statements into a Creepshow story, and while it has been there in the past and has been impactful, I don't really see the impact of this story, because the guy's a piece of shit. He doesn't learn anything. He just has something terrible happen to him, and I guess it's making his stance like that. But yeah, it gets into that gross territory. Not the direction I would have gone with the idea whatsoever. But I can see what it's trying to say, and I'll just leave it there. It's whatever. All right. So at number 11, we have a story called Sacrifices. And this comes from issue 3, and this was by Joel Farrelly. And I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. This was a pretty decent story. So Sacrifices is a schlock for the sake of schlock story, but I do think it has a fun ambiance with a cruise ship, and I love me some cruise ship horror. There's a Treat Williams movie from the 90s. I forget the title of it, but that movie's a great little B movie, and this has some similar charm to it. It's a very simple concept, though, and there's a lot of missing pieces, I feel, but some really good body horror here. So this one's about this man who is looking to essentially double cross this man on a cruise ship who has this really rare red diamond, and his wife may be involved with helping him to double cross her own husband. And essentially it comes down to a quarrel when the guy tries to swallow the diamond, and his wife ends up getting held by gunpoint, and there's a big reveal that the diamond is associated with this creature that the man has been feeding victims to so that he can have this rare diamond and be the wealthiest man in the world. And let's just say something happens to the ship. The two perpetrators end up washing on an island, but the story kind of ends before, we get to see what really happens. But we do get to kind of understand the gravity, because this giant monster rips up at least one of them. So yeah, that's all you really get out of the story. Now, I will say, I like the ambiance to it. I like the message of double-crossing people, but they don't know the methods of success behind the guy they're double crossing, and it's going into that common thing we kind of saw in Tales from the Crypt a lot with their stories, is that you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know, and sometimes there's some perils of knowing the full context before you decide to make a rash and very important decision that will impact the rest of your life. Other than that, I think it needs more backdrop to it. It just throws into a scenario. You don't really feel much about the characters. There is some disbelief about the monster, and the cruise ship feels just like an added note to kind of make it stand out a little bit. But yeah, pretty decent story. I like the ending to it. So there you go. At number 10, this one could have been an episode. I really wish they had an episode for this one to flesh it out a bit more, because the concept is so unique. I've never seen anything like this. It's Killer Cart Corral. This came from issue number 4, and it was written by Nick Dragotta, and I gave this a high decent at a 3.25 out of 5 stars. This story, I think, could have been way better. So the concept is that this mom who has a piece of shit son who's a teenager, he's like a delinquent, he gets away with pretty much murder because she just babies him. They're out in a parking lot outside of this huge grocery store or convenience store type of thing. And the son is asked to return the cart, but he bangs it into a car first, and then he puts it into the corral, but then he disappears. And the mom is worried about her son. Where did he go? And he goes inside to ask the owner if they can check the cameras. And the owner essentially drops a bombshell on her, saying that you're a bad mother because you let him get away with stealing stuff. And the mom tries to defend her son pretty much down to the tooth and nail, to the point where the woman's like, look, I had a son, but he was killed because he was doing nothing wrong. And he got his life taken away while your son gets to live, and he's an asshole. So she tries to run away from this woman, but when she gets out to the parking lot, let's just say that something is waiting for her at the corral, and she meets a grisly end. Now, here's the thing about the concept. I think this one could really work. I do see the swings at the parallel between the store owner's son and the woman's son. Even though, like, the story is very condensed in that comic book format, this one needed a lot more there. I feel like we needed more setup to getting to the store, to get to understand the relationship between the mom and the son a bit better. I feel like the son is hardly in the story enough to really classify him as worthy of dying. Like, I do feel there is some disbelief and some nonsense you kind of have to put at the door about the woman's motives, but it seems to be out of her control enough for me to overlook a few things about that. But the ending is typical Creepshow schlock for the sake of it. There's no explanation as to why this all is happening. No origin to why, let's just say, a cadaver is committing murders at a Cart Corral. But yeah, it's a fun one, and that's all you can really ask for. And at number 9, this one is right on the same wavelength of quality. I think this one would have been a fantastic episode, and I would have wanted to see better context fleshed out for this one, sadly. But it was fun enough, and I dig the idea behind it. It's Fossil Record. It's from issue 1, and it was written by Phil Hester. And I gave this also a 3.25 out of 5 stars. A high decent. So this concept really had me at first. It's about this archaeologist. He's also a professor at a university. He is obsessed with finding the research of this one doctor who has this weird lifestyle, I guess. But the guy feels like he's on the verge of kind of adding on to what this former researcher had done about looking at these trilobite fossils found in the earth. And there's something that he seems to theorize about the fossils that show that there were wounds put into, like, the sides of them. And he seems to think that mass extinction events in the past, according to all these fossils that he's been looking into, and these are some of the earliest ones in history that he's been able to find, have had these similar looking mass extinction events where something invades their body and rids them that way. Well, he ends up finally meeting the person that he needs to contact, and he's like some I don't know how to put this. He's kind of kooky, and he's mining out below his research facility, and he's trying to communicate with the man, but the man's like spouting something about what he thinks to be of the situation, and something happens to the old gentleman. But that ends up being the plot twist of the story, and we get to see, let's just say, another max extinction event happen for humanity. This one gets really fun in the back half, but then again, we're going into that Creepshow schlock. There's not enough page space to really flesh out the story that much. There is a lot of dialogue in here to kind of set you up with the idea a little bit better than some other stories, and I will tip my hat for that. But I do feel like you don't get enough of the researcher that he's coming to find, and there's a lot of missing pieces with this and like his research. Like, okay, how'd you come to this? You know, we kind of understand mildly how that is, but we're only seeing a brief snippet of what he has. And this is like the textbook story from this volume that needed an episode or a movie segment to do the story justice. It just doesn't fit in like a 4 to 5 page comic format, or 6 pages sometimes. So there you go. And the last of the decents, at number 8, we have Keep It Fed. This came from issue number 5, and it was written by David D.B. Andre and Tim Daniel. And I also gave this the same score at a 3.25 out of 5 stars. This one had a fun concept. I would have loved to see this as an episode as well. I think it would have probably executed the idea a bit better because page constraints on this one yet again. But the concept of this, it starts off in the past with a guy, he's a young boy, and he's trying to tell his parents that there's a monster under his bed. But his parents just say that it's a bunch of jargon and bullshit. And the kid, he's like a comic book geek, and he just loves reading. And one night he has this interaction with the monster under his bed, and the monster is hungry. But the kid realizes, like, maybe I can just feed him stuff that I have. And he starts feeding him comics that he's already read. And the monster ends up liking it. And we get a fast forward up until, I guess, the guy's like a teenager or an adult maybe. And him and his monster have kind of become friends over the years, bonding over, you know, he'll read a comic and then feed it to his monster. Well, let's just say one day there's an event that arises that the guy does not see coming. Something happens to the comics of this boy, let's just say, or man. And it has to deal with the parents, and the parents are, you know, gung-ho on getting rid of the guy's comics because he's just obsessed with them. And he's like, you don't understand, the monster in my bed, he eats them. I don't know what's going to happen here. Well, let's just say something arises with the monster under his bed, and it may or may not play into the fate of the parents. And then we get this weird ending where the kid, who never really felt like he belonged in his family but belonged with the monster, you get something involving that where they kind of become equals. And I'll just leave it there. Yeah, interesting concept. It does play into something similar that Model Kid did in season 2 of the Creepshow show, and I can see the appeal of the idea. And I do like some meta aspects about the Creepshow franchise in the story. It is trying to be more of a love letter, but then again, not a lot to this one. You don't really understand the gravity of why the dad and the mom have an estranged relationship with their son. It does lean into that "you gotta believe me" trope that I can't stand in kids horror because it's overused in that subgenre. Here, seeing it in adult horror, it's the same effect. So it's a high decent. It might be on the cusp of a good or like a low good, but I'm fine keeping it here. Now, at my number 7, we have a very similar title as to the last one. This story is called Keep It Down. This was from issue 2. It was written by Dan Waters, or Waiters. I don't know if I'm butchering that name, but I'm sorry. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought this one was pretty good. Out of all the art styles, I think this one was one of the more appealing art styles from this whole volume collection. And I do think that the idea was fun in like a humorous way. So this one is about a woman who suddenly starts having these medium abilities. And I don't know how this came about. I don't remember the exact details, but she's visited by these ghosts. I think because she has a picture of some old woman, and this one ghost starts talking to her, and she's like, "Oh, this is really cool. I can talk to spirits." But then, as the story goes along, all these spirits start coming to her because she seems to be the only person that can listen to them, and she gets really annoyed because it's starting to affect her day-to-day life. It's starting to affect her hobbies. It's starting to affect her sleep, and she gets driven insane one day to the point where she wants to cut off her ear so she can just be deaf forever and silence these ghosts. Well, let's just say once she does that and she bandages herself up and she's finally able to get some sleep, there's a twist that the ghosts reveal that it's kind of left field, but it serves as a punch to the story, where there might be another being out there that can hear her, because if she can hear them in the afterlife, then I guess the ruler of a certain location in the afterlife can hear her, and it plays into the ending, and the ending is very humorous, let's just say. Yeah, fine idea. It would have been a funny one to see done in like a TV show realm, but I think the concept was pretty cut and dry. The only thing it really is missing is, I guess, a more adequate explanation as to why she suddenly start hearing spirits. And I do think that the spirit relationships, we get little snippets here and there. I don't really feel like, especially at a part of the reveal where she cuts her ear off, we don't really get to see what they're talking about that much. That's why it comes left field. I think that could have been a little bit better woven into the story. But other than that, pretty entertaining, and I enjoyed myself with this one. So there's that. Now at number 6, this one was actually written and drawn by a specific writer. It's called Eternity, Eternity, Eternity. It comes from issue 3, and it's by Zoe Thorogood. This is the first thing I think I've ever read from this writer, if I'm not mistaken. I give this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This one is a more expansive story, at least in terms of a timeline. It jumps around a lot. I think the pace is kind of rushed through because of the page constraints, but I thought it was a pretty good story nonetheless. So this woman, she goes through this like experimental procedure that essentially makes her immortal, and she's going through her monologue. As time goes on, she experiences a bunch of different wars across this 700-year time period, where she meets many lovers, but they die and wither away before she ever does, and it's an endless cycle of that. And eventually some locust takes over her arm because of a certain thing that happens. And then at one point, she gets found by like a group of like wild people, essentially, that burn her, but she essentially proves herself that she's a god, and she essentially rules a civilization down the line. But then eventually they go, and then she's the last one in the world, and she grows tired of this endless life, and let's just say she pulls a trick from Stephen King, let's just say, with a certain story, and waits to die. So yeah, this story is there's not a lot to it, sadly, even though you have a bunch of expansive events. I feel like it just starts you off in the origin, but I wish they spent more time there with like why this was going on. I think that's the most compelling part of the whole story. And then you get these segments of her going through these timeline, meeting various lovers. This would have been like a fantastic movie idea, maybe, or like a standalone episode in the Creepshow show. But as a comic, I do feel like the pacing's just a little too rushed. You're trying to smack so much into the concept. I get it, for a comic it works in a good way, but it's not really that home run that you're looking for, or at least that I'm looking for with these comic stories. So that's why it's here. Now we're taking my top 5. Aside from Eternity, 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 and Keep It Down, which I'll also recommend to you all to read, these top 5 are easily the best of this volume, in my opinion. At number 5, we have a story from the holiday special, and it's Christmas Man. This was written by Daniel Kraus, who also wrote, I think, some other comics in the past, if I'm not mistaken, and he wrote some episodes in the Creepshow show. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars as well, but this is on the upper end, pushing a 3.75 for me. This story is just super fun. It's a holiday-centered one, if you can't tell by the title. And it's about this girl. She's being pestered by her 2 older cousins who are just these pompous asshole boys that just get away with murder, essentially. And they're telling her this story about this monster who essentially chases Santa Claus around the world every Christmas Eve because he's after the blood of Santa. It sounds wild, and if you've ever seen Shapeshifters Anonymous, it's kind of playing on that kookiness a little bit, which I dig. And let's just say there's a whole mechanism of why this is all able to happen, because the kid mentions that anything can happen on Christmas. But the girl, she's so scarred by this story that there's a thing involving stockings that she's taken a precaution for, let's just say. But when she takes the stockings, it may or may not bring this monster that they were telling her to life. And there's a fucked up ending with one of the cousins that involves the girl's decision, and it's pretty gnarly. But yeah, this one was just a good pushing good story. It's a fun concept. It would have been a fantastic episode, I feel, with more context. I thought that going into the mind of the story a little bit, the story did use like hand-drawn panels to make it look like somebody doodled it with crayon and trying to explain what the story was like. It was fun. It just had this holiday atmosphere to it, in that morbid, if you like Christmas horror things, kind of way. It's missing. It's just missing something. There's not a whole story here. It's just fast forwarding through the key events of it all. And I feel like what could have made the story pop a little bit better is getting into more of the character relationships, and getting more into the climax of it all. The climax is a bit rushed. I wish there was more to it, because I thought the idea was so well done. So, yeah, it didn't quite hit all the parameters of what I call a very good, great, or perfect, but definitely top 5 worthy. Now, my number 4, honestly, this one could be a very good sometimes, but I gave this a 3.75 out of 5 stars because I really dig the concept of this one. It's very frightening. It's called The Man with No Eyes. This came from issue number 2 and was written by Michael Walsh. Now, this one had some commentary to it about letting your kids be raised on television. And I think that it plays a good message in the story. So this single dad, he has an alcohol problem, but he also has to work nights, and he can't afford a babysitter. Has to leave his son home alone, and he tries to encourage him just to watch TV and let that be his babysitter. But the son starts to find, as he's channel surfing, this show that's like this magician, and the magician kind of speaks to him through the TV, and the kid gets like hypnotized, and the dad finds him like sleeping in front of the TV one day, and he's like, well, you're up, a little late, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, but later on the dad's like, well, I need to go to sleep, and he's watching TV again, and the magician guy's there, and he's like, let your dad sleep, and hypnotizes him again. And the dad sleeps so much that he's late for work, and he's revealed to be abusive towards his son, like upset with him. And the son is like, I can never do anything wrong, you're never home. And he's trying to confide in his emotions, but he sees the magician on the TV, and he's like, hey, look, it's my friend. And the dad's like, this is your problem, you don't know the importance and a reason to help our well-being, essentially. Well, let's just say the dad tries to do something to the TV, and this might release this magician out of it. And let's just say something tragic happens to the kid in some fucked up way, but that translates to the ending where the kid kind of gets his revenge on his dad. So yeah, this one, I wish this would have been an episode. It would have been controversial, I feel, because, kids are involved in the story. But then again, They did episodes like The Companion in season 1 and the Halloween one by Bruce Jones. I forget the title of it. But if they can pull that off, they can easily do this. I just thought the concept was frightening. It reminds me of a Haunting Hour episode called Uncle Howie. But this is definitely the darker version of it. And yeah, there is some things to you kind of have to overlook. And that is, some plot contrivances, and you don't really get the understanding of the parent and the son's relationship other than some scenes, and we're told these events from the past kind of thing. I don't like that in stories that much unless they actually go into a lot of depth, maybe introduce a flashback to help. But if it had those things, it probably would have bumped up the quality. But then again, this is easily one of the more frightening Creepshow comic segments I've seen. So, yeah, I thought this one was pretty well done. Now, my top 3 are some of the most well-written comic stories I've seen in the Creepshow comics thus far. They're definitely some of the more fleshed-out ones. And these type of stories are what the comics should be aiming for. If you're out there watching the people behind the Creepshow comics, I think these 3 are the type of stories that you should put in there because they have more meat to chew on, they have more exposition, it feels more whole, and the idea doesn't feel too grand to have to skip over to key events, and stick with these type of things here. So, at number 3, we have The Amulet. And The Amulet came from issue 4, and it was written by Alyssa Whitney. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It's a very good one. Now, this one reminds me of Judy, You're Not Yourself Today from Tales from the Crypt. If you've seen that episode or have read the comic that inspired it, you have probably seen this. But this is a well-done story, in my opinion. Not without some flaws, but the concept of this one is that this elderly woman who has this amulet that she wears around her neck is sent to an old person's home, essentially, to be given over to caregivers. And this caregiver is this woman who runs this establishment with like bad food. She mistreats the patients and stuff. And later on in the story, you realize that this woman, since she has this nice amulet, is being targeted essentially for death by this caregiver, because what she does is that she feeds them essentially poison and like starves them, does whatever, drugs them to death. And then she takes the belongings of these old people. So this woman, this caregiver, deserves to die, essentially. Well, she doesn't know what the amulet is, and there comes to a point in the story where the caregiver tries to kill this old woman, let's just say. But we get to learn what the powers of the amulet do, and the powers involve maybe some body switching, right? And instead of the kind of ending you'd expect out of a story like this, it's kind of told in a humorous way where let's just say the caregiver is now the old woman and the shoes are on the other foot now. Well, there's also a thing about what they do with the bodies of said old people, and that plays into the ending. So, yeah, this one was very entertaining. I thought this was a very well-paced story. As an episode, I don't know if this one would have fared well. I think as a short and sweet comic, it's pretty much as good as you're going to get. The only thing it's kind of missing for me is the correlation of the dead bodies that are implied in the story and how that plays into what happens to the caregiver at the end. I do like it as a subversion and stuff, but we're getting into some I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say some things hard to digest, if you get what I'm trying to say there. Yeah, don't really see the humor in that. And I don't really get why the person in question would just be okay with that. I don't know. And there's some questions about, if you look at the logic of the story, you have to put some disbelief aside over one thing. And the one thing is the families of these old people. Do they not know to look into this? They disappear at this institution. Police haven't been informed yet. Or are they targeting women and men who are old that don't have family? Are they elder orphans, right? And this it is thought-provoking. It is coming to commentate on the treatment of old people in elderly institutions. And I do think it serves a powerful message. So there you go. Not without its flaws, though. Now, my number 2, this comes from the one-shot, which was based on the Joe Hill story from Full Throttle, and it's Wolverton Station. This was written by Joe Hill and Jason Chiarimella. I also gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, which is a very good. Unlike the rest, I think this one, since it's the only one based on a short story, I actually read the short story in Full Throttle, and I have to say, Wolverton Station's short story isn't as good as its comic counterpart. And honestly, out of all the stories that they could have picked from Full Throttle to adapt, you mean to tell me they passed up Dark Carousel and Fawn, but they made Wolverton Station? I mean, maybe that's some hope that they're going to put Fawn and Dark Carousel in a season of Creepshow, maybe. Cross your fingers. But this story is about this gentleman who, he's an American collector. He likes to collect memorabilia of iconic horror movies, but throughout his history of collecting, he's definitely conned people and like lowballed them and given them like shitty offers that don't really help him out. So he's not really likable. But he gets this lead one day from this gentleman who's been trying to sell him this silver cane of this famous werewolf movie over in the United Kingdom. And the guy's like, you know what? He's looking at this werewolf prop he has. He goes, I can add something else to my werewolf collection. I'll be over there to buy this thing. So when he gets over there, he's directed to go to like this train station to go to this town called Wolverton. But while he's going to Wolverton, he starts to notice that the people around him aren't actually people. They're like sentient werewolves. And this is freaking him out. And he's like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. He thinks that he's in like a dream loop or something. But he gets snapped back into reality when he's in a train car bathroom and he sees some blood and guts and he sees like a dead corpse that was ripped apart by a few werewolves, and he realizes that he's like fucked if he doesn't get out of there. So once the train stops where he needs to go, he books it for a cab, and the cab driver is a werewolf himself, and he's like, well, I need to go to this destination. Well, turns out he may or may not have been set up either by the cab driver, the patrons on the train, or the person that he was on the phone with. I'm not too sure what the hell they were trying to go here, but it ends on a note where he gets his comeuppance, right? The only thing that really loses me about this story is who was plotting him going to where he was. Was it the guy on the phone? Was it these werewolf people on the train car? Was it the cab driver? I couldn't fucking tell you. But other than that, load of bullshit. This story was very fun, and I think it has a genuinely cool concept. It could have been maybe turned into a Creepshow episode segment, maybe even a film. I don't know how that would have gone over with the general audience. It probably would have been like a straight to Shutter movie or straight to video movie. But for like B-movie cheese, it works. And that's what Creepshow really is. So yeah, it embodies Creepshow very well. And I do think the changes from the source material are fun to see. I think there's more stuff involving the werewolves in the plot. There's more gore than what the short story has, and it's just more fun. So there you go. But Wolverton Station wasn't quite my number 1. So my number 1 is actually the second story from the holiday special, and it's called Package Thieves. This one was written by James Asmus or Athmus. I don't know how to say the name. I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. I gave it a 4.25 out of 5 stars, which is a high, very good, almost pushing great. And this story, minus its one glaring flaw, which is basically the resolution of it being as sudden as it was, I think is a powerful message on the holidays, right? And taking from others, losing sight on the spirit of it, not thinking about how your decisions impact others and other families and what that entails for somebody else. It's a powerful one, and that's why it's my number 1. So the concept is these two, I don't know what they call them, package thieves, or, you know, like those people that notoriously, they'll see like a Amazon truck drop off a package and they'll go to the door, take the package and run off and speed off. That's what they do. And they run this secondhand store where they sell all this stolen goods, and around the holidays is where they get a lot of stuff, right? Well, these two girls are, you know, doing their thing, but in some of the packages, there's turning up body parts inside. And this is freaking out one of the girls, and it seems to only be happening to her. And she doesn't tell her friend like the whole story about it, but she is kind of keeping it filed in the back of her head. And as the story goes along, and as she keeps doing this and finding more body parts, she's starting to understand the conscience of the conscience that's in her head, essentially, about the situation. And you get a feeling that somebody's purposely targeting her and her friend for doing what they're doing. And there comes a point in the story where they're running their shop and they're trying to sell something that, or a toy that was stolen. And this gentleman comes in saying, hey, I want to buy this for my daughter. They're sold out everywhere. I ordered one online, but somebody stole the package off my doorstep. And it turns out that they were the thieves trying to like sell it for way more than it was worth. And the guy didn't have the money because his daughter was sick from like cancer or something. And he's had to put all of his money into that. And he's upset that he can't buy the toy. And I think there's like some subtext where he knows that they might be involved. And the girls are acting like pieces of shit about the situation. And the other girl starts to realize that maybe this other girl doesn't see what she's starting to see in the situation, and that plays in to the following events where they try to take one last package, but there's a hang-up, let's just say, and it plays into the ending where we get this confirmation that somebody has been hunting these two for what they've been doing, but we never find out who it is. There's never a reveal of like a scorned person affected by this. There's never a monologue from the killer. It just ends before we find out what happens to the girl that had more of a conscience in the story. Now, that's my biggest negative with it. But what I got from this was very impactful. I definitely see what they were going for, and I think it worked very well. It's taking from others without understanding how that can impact their lives is a very thought-provoking thing. And using the holidays to do that is ingenious. I think this one has probably the best moral I've seen come out of these Creepshow comics, and I have to tip my hat to them. They made something memorable here, and it's honestly, I think, in my top 20 of the whole franchise. And if we are counting all the movie segments, all the book stories, the comic book stories, the TV show episodes, it's in there. Very, very well thought story. Just needed a little bit more at the end for me to put it in a full-on grade. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Creepshow Volume 2. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section about all 13 stories. Which one was your favorite? Which one was your least favorite? What was your favorite issue? If you want to know mine real quick, I thought issue 1 and 5 were easily the weakest. I thought issue 3 was pretty good. Issue 2 was pretty good. Issue 4 was pretty good. But easily the two must reads from this volume are actually the specials. Go read the holiday special and go read Wolverton Station. I think these two are easily the best ones out of it. But if you find the trade or you find individual issues from this volume, just know that 1 and 5 are stinkers in my opinion. So yeah, let me know down in the comments section about all that. I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.